Hey guys, Stealth here and welcome back to more Broken Arrow. Today I am playing as the Special Forces Air combination. So Special Forces Airborne Infantry. This deck has a very high mobility stat. You're able to get your units around very quickly using helicopters. Your infantry is good. There is one thing that is bad. You are not very good at staying. You're not very good in the fighting department up against other tanks. Because you don't have much in the form of a tank. The best tank I get is the M8. That's it. So with that, I'll have to try and fight out other tanks or IFVs. And knowing some of the Russian IFVs, they're pretty scary. The commentary that you're getting is a post-mortem, because during the game I was heavily focusing and seeing the feedback from the first video that I published with game footage. There was no commentary there, which in hindsight was not a good decision. So you're getting a post-mortem commentary on what I was doing / thinking during this game. My plan over here is to go for the right-hand side. There's lots of forests, that's where my infantry can shine. It's also where I have the opportunity to flank. I can get some sneaky snipers around, maybe get some information for other players, and potentially use either an airstrike or some of my support vehicles to go after high-value targets. That is the plan. In the meanwhile, start deploying a bit of units along the front line in various spots and ideally move all the way over to H in order to capture that. As before, I tend to bypass objectives, making sure that I can reactively or retrospectively capture them. Oh, sorry, retroactively, rather than having to sort of fall forward and push into the enemy. So the India objective, which I'm angling for, is not that high of a concern. As long as I have a front line beyond it, I can always send a cheap scout or a transport to capture it. First up though, we have this MiG to deal with and a nice helicopter to kill. If I can get that one, that might make it easier for my allies on the left flank. Unfortunately, my Raptor took a big bad hit there, and I'm gonna have to try and force it back. If that doesn't work, that is about 400 points for the enemy. And I do believe that my F-22 did make it out. In the meanwhile, my helicopters have arrived. Delta Force is on the front line. I'm sending in an F-35 to try and oh, actually, my F-22 did make it out. I'm trying to send out an F-35 to try and catch that radar-guided missile battery that was able to take out my aircraft. Of course, their radar doesn't have to be active. And as such, the F-35 does not actually find anything. The radar is only really active once you have something that is stationary. This, after all, is not Wargame Red Dragon, where radars can be on while moving. Silent Hawk have dropped off the Delta Force, the other one has dropped off the Airborne, so at least I have some forward presence, and hoping that I can at least start taking some terrain. There's not a whole lot on the front line, though. I'm pretty light on the front line. Bringing up some Airborne snipers on the far right-hand side to try and start flanking. And just keeping an overall watch on the environment. What are we seeing? What's interesting is that I'm not seeing helicopters. At least not Soviet ones, which means potentially there's not a VDV deck opposing me. You could argue that's good and that's bad. Good, because I essentially have no air defense. Bad, because it means that I might be fighting some heavier vehicles. Which is something that this deck really doesn't do that well against. Unless you happen to have the ability to use, for example, a lot of air power, either aircraft or helicopters or both, or you got a lot of tow teams, which in this case I don't. What I find on my way here is a T-15 Barbarous. That is a problem. I'm trying to rush my Delta Force into position, but the Delta Force that I have as such is only armed with an M72. That light anti-tank weapon is barely going to make a dent in that T-15. Thankfully, Chancellor David's going to help me out with his Kiowa. And there we go. There's the Barbarous. Look at how quickly Delta is going to melt once they actually get line of sight on them. For now, it's just going directly for the objective. And there is AA, so unfortunately sending in a helicopter, which I would like to do. There we go. Delta Force just melts. That's half of the Delta Force gone in a matter of seconds. And those squads are expensive. So in this case, my opener was just bad. I did not have the tools to deal with the problem. And then, to make matters worse, I didn't have the scouting forces, so the recon, to keep that thing lit. Airborne trying to engage that Barbarous and also getting their ass handed to them. Airborne at least have a better anti-tank weapon, but it is still not good enough. The Barbarous by Kestrel, however, is kind of vulnerable if I can get a couple of missiles in on it. And it is an expensive unit. If I can eliminate that, I can probably get back into the game. Because I do need to start healing up my forces, trying to get them back into one piece. There is the Sentinel that I had ordered to try and scout things out. And of course, immediately it's getting engaged. Since drones typically have almost no way of defending themselves, that thing is pretty much toast. The Barbarous seems to be hunting down the Delta Force unit right now. There's not a whole lot I can do about that. I can just try running away. And that's exactly what I'm doing. Running from forest to forest and not fighting this T-15. I will simply not win it. As for the rest, well, there's more Airborne coming in. There's a Thunderbolt coming in. The Thunderbolt ideally will take out that AA unit, so that the Comanche has a much safer time of then engaging the T-15. It's not a great plan, but it is the only play that I really have at the moment. There's a Slam Ram engaging a MiG and getting a kill on it. Unfortunately, I think it was Chancellor David who lost his own aircraft in the trade. Delta Force pulling back. One thing about this territory is that it is pretty easy to fall back with your forces and get them healed up. I still don't really have a whole lot of air defense other than that Slam Ram, but I'm kind of filling up the gaps with the Comanche, which is armed with a couple of Stingers, and can, in a pinch, be used to shoot down enemy helicopters. Delta trying to fall back. I'm assuming that Barbarous is still between my Delta and the enemy front line, or potentially the Barbarous is the enemy front line at this stage. I was discussing with David, can M8 AGSs deal with the Barbarous? The answer is yes, or at least he suspected as much. And he said, well, you might lose one, but that could still be worth it. Because once you have dealt with that unit, you can then at least move around a little bit more freely. Alternatively, I could have sent in not the M8s, but tried to sort of guesstimate where the where the T-15 was. Maybe send some cruise missiles after it. Let's get some STT in there, again on the flank with the Little Bird. STT is the Special Tactics Team, capable of using a couple of anti-air weaponry. So if there is a helicopter threat there, I will both A, spot it, and B, be able to engage it. Finally, the supplies have arrived, and believe me, that Delta Force is going to need it. They are still alive, despite being hammered, and they are kind of holding the line. The enemy with that T-15 was able to capture India, but right now I'm able to capture it back using one of my cheap vehicles. Some of the buys that I did are pretty awkward, especially in retrospect. But, well, I'm still learning the game, and I think I was feeling quite a bit of pressure in this one in order to do well, which, of course, at least for me personally, doesn't really do a lot of wonders for my effectiveness. There we go. The Barbarous has taken a hit from the Comanche, pretty badly beaten up. Thunderbolt takes it out. Beautiful. Thunderbolt can now hold its position in that sector, and we start capturing it. Points-wise, we're very undecided for now. The game is only 2 minutes old. We are looking at a 44% control of the caps. We are about to get another one. There we go, and that puts us at 56. That's the good news. The bad news is the enemy is slightly ahead on points. And I believe that in this game, I might have something to do with that. There we go. Thunderbolt pushing forward. I really do not have a lot of recon. And as you can see, I'm not playing the deck well. I'm playing the deck almost as if it were a standard frontline deck. It is not. This deck, at least my opinion on it, flank. Move around. Find other vectors to attack from. That flank over there with the airborne snipers, I'm already spotting vehicles coming in. That is the type of information I should be using. That's the type of information that I should be pursuing and making use of to push that flank or ambush that vehicle. Not great. And this is... oh, look at that. We got a vehicle over there. That's a BMP. That's a recon BMP at that. And it actually manages to take out a tank. That is how good, or, well, how bad my tanks are. They simply don't have the staying power, especially if they're getting shot in the flank. I think an Abrams would not have had that same problem. It would definitely not have had its ass killed as quickly as that. Thunderbolt here tries to pursue the anti-air unit that I saw, especially with assistance from Airborne. I just don't have enough recon, again. And there's a BMPT Terminator coming in, which is going to be a bit of a problem for that M8. If I can have 2 of them against the Terminator, I can probably win it. If I can have 1... not really. So let's call in a unit that I might have more success with in the form of an Apache. The Apache is also there to try and defeat that BMP. The BMP manages to ignore the missile as the Comanche loses line of sight. And then the BMP goes off against the Comanche. Comanche having some difficulty trying to spot. It's getting hit, and dead. I flew way too close to that unit trying to keep line of sight on it. And the unit had moved up quite a bit, leading to the loss of the Comanche. Well played. There is a shock damage on the BMPT. BMPT trying to fall back. And especially that ambush, that saved me. Otherwise, I don't think I would have won this fight. As most of the time the BMPTs have a couple of anti-tank missiles around. Next answer to that problem is the Apache longbow, which promptly also gets shot down. I just simply don't learn my lesson this time around, so I call in a Thunderbolt. But a Thunderbolt needs a spotter. If you don't have a spotter, your Thunderbolt isn't really going to do much. For the front line, I'm bringing up a TOW-2B, especially on the flank. I might be able to eliminate a vehicle from fairly short range. And I'm also spotting a whole bunch of vehicles, infantry coming up. Thankfully, the TOW-2B survives. But I don't really have much of an answer to that infantry blob beyond the Delta Force and maybe the snipers from the flank. I can, however, start using my Thunderbolt there. But the Thunderbolt right now is just otherwise engaged. You can see more vehicles are coming in. I'm getting my guys to fall back a little bit. I think the snipers are set to hold fire. So they're not allowed to fire. They're just allowed to detect and not do much of anything. NTR is already wrecking my Thunderbolt. Dead. Nice play. Thunderbolt gone. As you can see, I'm really struggling to make this deck work. Sacrificing several helicopters and, well, sort of by extension, an A-10 to deal with one enemy reconnaissance unit is not exactly one of the high points of this gameplay. But at least it taught me something. So I guess we can hope I do better next time around. Anyway, let's bring in some more units. More Delta Force for the front line, because I am hoping to get to Hot Point Hotel. And if I can get there, I can probably at least start contributing something to the team. Because it feels like over here, I'm just minding my own little corner. But, you know, not really making that much of a contribution. Yes, I have captured a point. But I'm feeding the enemy team like crazy. Look at the points. It's 3505 for us. Or what is it? 3650? Versus 5280 for them. 5260. I'm looking at this in the editor. It's a bit difficult to tell. At any rate, it's not going that well. So I do need to start getting some more points in order to sort of recoup the investment that I'm making in my troops. And right now I'm not getting it. There, I almost ran a couple of Thunderbolts right into an enemy RPG team. It's, you know, sometimes it's just one of those days where I stack mistake on mistake on mistake. And at some point you go, ah, screw it. Or you take a breath and you go, okay, that was not great. Let's see, take a breath, regroup, and do better. And that's what I'm always trying to do in these games. And it's not easy. Sometimes you just really have a bad day. You have a bad game, you have, I don't know, a bad moment. You got things going on at work, things going on in your life, and you just want to have some fun, and even that isn't working. Accept the suck and move on. Accept that today might not be the day that it's going to work out for you in a game, and still see how you can come back from it. In this case, I'm going to start to do a bit more flanking. So that's why I sent the SOAR out to the right flank in order to drop off some more infantry. Over here, the TOW team is finally in position to start doing something useful, but most of the tanks over there are smoked up, so they're not really getting that much action. Slam Ram pushing out to deal with an enemy helicopter, and over on the right flank there is an enemy unit coming in, which is bad news for the TOW-2B team, which has just arrived. Airborne rushing in to try and save their bacon. Not sure if I can get there in time. Delta Force, time to push in. Even in your weakened state, you can still definitely make a dent in whatever is left of those guys. And over on the right hand side, I still have the information about what units are coming in. And that is very, very valuable. Unfortunately, my recon is not spread out enough. And because of that, the enemy is able to sneak in units like this. So the flank works with me, because I can get intel, and it works against me just as much because I'm losing information and I'm getting units past me too. Thunderbolts going up against a T-80 as well as some infantry there. Thunderbolt, of course, is really not supposed to engage a T-80, at least not in those conditions. In an ambush, yeah, you can probably get away with it. But I see the M8 much more as a vehicle capable of dashing out, killing some vehicles and dash back. Which is not what they're presently doing. I'm using this as a stand-up tank. This deck is... well, either it's going to take a lot more training for me to get it right. It might need a different cooperation. So it might need to work together with, for example, an armored Marines deck to hold the front line, and I can start flanking. If you don't have that, it's not great. At least not in my hands. But maybe you're going to be able to get more success from it a little later, as you get to play the game in June, which by the time that you're watching this video isn't that far away. I know, every day you're not playing Broken Arrow might be one day too many, but hey, time will pass anyway, so it'll be June before you know it. As for Delta, what I really like about this Delta loadout with their snipers is that they can engage and just squash infantry very, very quickly. That's what Delta is ideal for. And with these forests, sometimes you get the opportunity to really make them shine, really get the damage in quickly. Over here, they have engaged both the sniper and my STT team. Sorry, STT. That's already a bit of a double. So, unfortunately, I just lost all units on that flank, which leaves me vulnerable. And with 537 points, I should be able to buy some additional units, but I'm a little bit more focused on getting the units in here, because we're making a play for H, and that is a bit more important right now than to secure that flank. Yes, it's a gamble, and I don't want to gamble that much, so I do send another unit out. But the units that I do have on the front line, I want to just support David as much as I can. Try and save some of my honor, if you will. Delta Force moving up, again, mostly useful against other infantry units, not that useful against other vehicles. So that's why the M8 AGS is slightly behind them to suppress enemy transports if I see them. As you can see, there's nothing going on, and I finally decide, okay, I want to get a sentinel over there just to at least start spotting if they're moving anything along. If not, whatever. Maybe I can just ignore that flank for the time being. Probably not safe, but let's get some information and work from that. Over on the other hand side of the map, there is a bit going on, but I'm trying not to focus on it too much, as I'm trying to focus on my own flank. In the meanwhile, we're at phase 2, and our team has scored 2 points. We are in control of 78% of the caps at this point. So if we can keep this up for the next 8 minutes or so, we can get 6 points from that. Unfortunately, I am still feeding the enemy. I believe some of my teammates were also having some bad moments, and of course, we're all going to be feeding at some point. But for now, we're looking at 500 points for our team in kills and 1280 for them in this round. Well, this phase. So for now, the enemy's definitely doing a heck of a lot better. And you can see that over on the right, they've taken control of the buildings that I actually wanted to get. There's also a Tu-22 circling around. My Slam Ram isn't in range, but my Sentinel is in range of their air defense. And once again, my air defense, or rather my Sentinel, goes down. To an extent, I don't really mind, because if a couple of these S-300 missiles are going to get at least, well, decoyed, if you will, by the Sentinel, rather than by a very expensive aircraft, I don't mind. I really don't mind. A very high value supply dump over there, 7.5k. So I'm sending the Thunderbolt out there to try and deal with it. Unfortunately, it meets its demise at the hands of a BMP-3. And once again, I find myself lacking really the infantry to try and stop that. Comanche on H, trying to stop an incoming T-15. The T-15 immediately smokes up and the missile loses line of sight. I don't have that many missiles left. I can, however, use some of the weaponry on the DAP, but the DAP is going to get, well, pretty quickly engaged. Their air defense was good. Maybe they noticed that I was using Airborne and adjusted with more air defense. Maybe it's just that they had air defense in all the wrong locations, at least from my perspective. Some of these buildings have pretty bad line of sight based on the amount of tree lines that they have. So the TOW-2B team here is not great. And there goes the DAP, 3 shots from the Barbarous and dead. Nice. Delta Force, in the meanwhile, working over an infantry group there. It's a recon. But also getting engaged by what I think is a T-80. And without a TOW-2 B team or a helicopter, I simply don't have any way to deal with it. Again, part of the weakness of this air deck, or at least the way that I'm playing it. Let's get some airborne deployed. I want to get that building back, at least so I can make sure there's not a whole lot of units being moved around my flank. At the other way, maybe I can deploy a TOW-2 B team there and start getting some damage in with them. Nighthawk coming in, throwing a cruise missile at that Sturm, and potentially throwing another cruise missile at H or at whatever other high value target I can find. I'm always a little surprised by how long it takes a Nighthawk to get there, but then again, it's not a particularly fast aircraft. There's one missile. Send the next. But where? Well, there was something in that building, so let's dump a missile on that and immediately evac the area. I find the Nighthawk to be a very safe way to just get a couple of units in, or get a couple of cruise missiles in. For example, wreck a building, and that did in fact lead to a kill. TOW-2 B team having a bit of a rough time against the BMP-3 there. And I believe that might be the BMP-3 that was able to engage and eliminate my AGS before. So maybe this time around with the other M8 I can get some damage in. I'm at least trying to relieve pressure on that TOW-2 B team because I really don't want to lose more of them. My supply dump over here is going to have to get moved forward a bit. But with all that anti-air, it's a bit difficult to move more troops in my helicopter and to move my supplies much more forward because I don't have the troops to hold the front line. I am, however, making a bit of a dash there with some of the snipers and the airborne. And over here on the right, let's get some of the airborne moving back towards that point so I can start pushing back on that. Su-25, very quickly dealt with by my allies. And over here I'm looking for a good vantage point for the snipers to start seeing what is coming in, what we need to deal with, and what we need to be preparing for. The higher the building, the more visual line of sight you're going to get, so very valuable taking those high buildings. And, here we go. On the right-hand flank, I can see that my airborne are getting some damage in, and especially with the grenade launcher, they are making very short work of these infantry units. It is a Motostrelki Igla, so it's an AA team. Makes sense. I was flying helicopters around, and they apparently did not appreciate that. I tried to plug that hole with a couple of Iglas. Makes sense. All fair. Now, snipers in position, but I'm not really seeing much, although there's a T-90 arena. Lovely. There's also a drone. And in the meanwhile, over here on the right, the airborne units are just decimating these Motostrelki. And I'm going to clear out the next building if there is anything in there. Let's get the other airborne back in the vehicle so I can relocate them. In the meanwhile, we have captured H. We're still in control of 78% of the caps. So if we can keep this up, that's going to be great. But look at the points. It is 5k for the enemy, 3k for us. So if they get a few more kills, they're going to be getting 2 points. Sorry, 4 points actually from that. Not great. Not great. As I'm looking at it now, where the snipers are, I should have set up for example, a couple of tow teams to start putting pressure on all of the vehicles that were driving across. As it is, I'm very happy that my snipers survived that engagement with quite a lot of infantry. There are 3 infantry groups inside that one tall building. And I really wanted to get them gone, because that's a nice investment of units. So call in a Nighthawk, get that Nighthawk to start hitting that building, or at least where they're going to be, because I'm not 100% on that. And I immediately press F1 and click that building to mark up, okay, that's where they were. So that in case I lose a line of sight, I'm still able to engage. Unfortunately, they're moving. But I do know that they're kind of going to this building, so one missile there, evac the plane. Wait for the cruise missile to come in. And let the airborne take the front for a little bit, because my snipers are definitely not going to be around for much longer. Cruise missile going in, artillery going in. There's one cruise missile, doing some damage, not actually getting the kill. There's the second. I did get the kill, I think, on the infantry in that building. So decimated those squads a bit, and that allowed the snipers and the airborne for now to survive. I was trying to get as many people into safety as possible to stop feeding, but it was not easy. A couple of little birds dropping off some Ranger Stingers, making sure we have some air defense in play. I do also have a couple of slam rams, but the second reason I think I was getting the Rangers with the Stingers is because they have pretty decent anti-infantry weaponry. So I wanted to get a couple of those machine guns going. Where? Yeah, there's the infantry. Yeah, there it is. They got some pretty decent machine guns, and that's what I wanted to get into play. Not so much their AA capabilities, it's the anti-infantry weaponry. Another MiG coming in on the left flank, not really my problem, but you can see that there's a lot going on there. They're pushing pretty hard. And it's none other than NBK and Blitzwar working together over there. Or actually, sorry, I think NBK was on my team. It's Blitzwar at the very least. Yeah, and NBK. These are wargame legends. They were putting a lot of pressure on that flank, and unfortunately we were not really going forward on that department. So what I decided to try and do was mostly hold the line on the right and see about assisting something on the left with maybe some seed, potentially follow up with a couple of other strikes, because they had tons and tons of equipment. Unfortunately, so much equipment that all of my seed missiles also got intercepted. Isn't that lovely? Not a whole lot I could do on that flank, especially with the enormous amount of firepower that they had, AA-wise that is. I just couldn't exactly push in, not with my air power. Too dangerous, and the chance that I got it shot down when the enemy's already about 3k ahead, not great. Also, they were able to take one of the caps off of us, so if it ticks over to the next phase in a few minutes, we're looking at even scores. And now we're not even looking at even scores. Now the enemy is going to be gaining 2 points. Not a good position to be in. For me on the right hand flank, there wasn't that much more to do, but to keep my troops alive and to try and get my troops resupplied. So over on the left, I tried to help out with a longbow. I know that there's a bunch of vehicles moving around. I just don't know where, so time to get a sentinel in and start scouting. The longbow at this point getting shots at a Krugenetz B-15. There's a whole bunch of vehicles behind that, but they're mostly sticking to the tree line, making it pretty difficult to engage them. Longbow already taking damage from unknown source. I think it might have been an anti-air missile, or rather surface-to-air missile. There's also the Derivatia, potentially several out there. So I decided to try and hammer that position with a couple of cruise missiles originating from the Nighthawk in order to do some damage. The rest of the aircraft, like the Spooky and the Thunderbolts, were just not going to be useful here. Arguably, most useful was potentially going to be the B-2, as the B-2 with a nuke would have cleaned out at least a few of those units and temporarily relieved pressure on that whole flank. The B-2, however, is extremely expensive to call in. I think it's 1,000 points if you get the nuke. And given the amount of air defense there, I kind of doubt it would have made it that far. What I could send over here is my artillery. And that's what I'm thinking of doing here. I need to send my artillery over because the rest is not really an option. I am floating 1,300 points. I just don't know where to send it. I don't really know what they need because I'm looking at the right flank, so I'm sort of new to the left flank. And certainly you can ask people, what do you need? And they might know to some extent, but I don't know exactly where the units are, what sort of units to bring in, so I tend to be a little hesitant with that. F-22 Raptor coming in to try and deal with these two aircraft circling around. My slam rams are not in range, so they're not able to do anything. And over here Delta is getting engaged by infantry backed up by more infantry and probably a vehicle or two arriving pretty soon, which is going to be a problem. As Delta doesn't have any anti-tank weapons, my Stingers, of course, are not really going to be useful against that either. So all I can do is wait for the Thunderbolt to deliver a couple of shots, call in potentially another helicopter, or run. I felt like those were my options at the time. None of them were particularly appealing. Bringing in helicopters in an urban environment like this might yield a couple of quick shots. The enemy player felt as if I had a whole bunch of anti-missile systems packed to his vehicles. Might be wrong, but it felt like most of my missiles were just getting stopped. There we go, trying to get a BMP 1AM. Unfortunately, no joy. In the meanwhile, Delta Force is getting hammered on the other side. There, I think that got the kill. Trying to push with the M8. Delta Force is rushing back as quickly as I can, because I can sort of use these buildings as cover, but not very long. Rushing them with the sprint order. The TOW 2 has, I think, a minimum range. Even if it didn't, it's out of missiles. So as much as I'd like to try and hold the line, all I can do that with is a couple of airborne troops. That's all. At this point, I got 2 Brutus. That is the artillery system. And I'm going to try and reroute those to the other flank, where the enemy definitely is pushing. Look at their score. They're 8,000 versus 11.5. So the enemy stands to make +6. We stand to make +2. There's about a minute left on this game. Well, on this phase. We have lost control of some of the caps. So our position is really not that good. Looking at it now, I can see that we've definitely overinvested with my forces on the right-hand flank. So, yeah, just not a great situation all around. And you can see that over there on the left, they're actually making it into Charlie. I'm going to send a couple of cruise missiles at these infantry units to try and dissuade them from pushing any farther. Whether that will work, I don't know. It felt like I was at least contributing something to the defense of that flank. But not a whole lot. There's the cruise missile. There's 1. Kill. 2. No kill. Now, I did call in 2 Comanches at some point. I'm not sure exactly. There they are. Not sure where they went. And over here I got a very badly wounded Delta, which is trying to fall back. I'm pushing some infantry forward, but arguably it's just the wrong force composition. It's a pretty hefty amount of AA. It's some snipers, which you don't need in these close town fights. At least I prefer not to use Delta. Sorry, snipers. I should have used different force composition there. Live and learn. Over on the left here we got Conti, which I think is Guastatore, pushing back on the left. Getting some nice results there. He seems to be pushing back pretty hard against some of those units and maybe finding some vulnerability in that flank. F-35A once again coming in with a couple of seed missiles. Maybe this time around they're going to be a little lower on ammunition. But once again, missile gets intercepted, second missile gets intercepted, and no joy. So, yeah, at this point I'm kind of considering pulling the F-35A out of this deck altogether because I'm just not really getting a whole lot of results with it. It's just, you know, most of the time the seed missiles just get intercepted. And there's not that much that I can deal with. So, maybe instead get the F-35 as another cruise missile bus. Get some cruise missiles onto a target and hope that they don't shoot those down too. Alright, we are now phase 3. The enemy stands to win 7 versus 4. And of course, that is not counting the current situation. Yes, by now we're looking at a +3. By now, or at least for now, I should say. There's a couple of vehicles coming in. I'm trying to get the Comanches to deal some damage, but I did see some AA, so I'm pulling the Comanches back already. I'm not eager to lose these birds. And also, I only have 2 anti-tank missiles, as I have my Comanches mostly set up for general fire support. So, rocket pods, stingers, and 2 Hellfires, but only 2. There were a few more vehicles around there that were eager to start pushing back. Nighthawk coming in once again on the left. We need a bit more damage on these units. The enemy has 940 points in kills. We have 215. They stand to get a +3 from that. And if they keep pushing and we keep losing forces like that, they will also capture Charlie. Which will also put us out of that +3 point. Because the caps will probably be even again. So all around, it's a pretty bad state of affairs. At this point, I'm starting to get my artillery over. I want to try and help out, especially to hold Charlie, because I think it's an important point. But the Brutuses, whatever, the arty units, are going to find that it's a pretty dangerous road to drive. And I believe only one of them will arrive there. Slam Ram relocating after firing a couple of shots. Airborne pulling back after getting hammered. And the Comanches are already getting hammered. Pulling them back as well. They did manage to survive. And they now urgently need additional firepower. They need additional supplies. I do believe I have some supplies in the back. But at this point I might have just evac'd them all together. There we go. One of the Brutuses has gone. I only have 1 Brutus left. Trying to get additional fire support. But of course I'm just switching back left and right between the flanks. And because of that I'm not really paying too much attention to where I might find a valuable target. This buy over here made not a whole lot of sense without a reconnaissance team. So I decided to get both. First a recon team to get some eyes on. And then a TOW team to start getting some kills. At least ideally. As for these stingers, yeah, they're potentially getting some damage in. But at this point, the enemy is starting to push back with vehicles. And once again, I find myself at the mercy of being forced to run away. Against that 57mm gun, I just don't have a recourse. I don't have an answer. I don't have a way to fight back. The enemy is also pushing back with RPG teams. And that means that my slam ram dies. So my anti-air teams are dead. My AA is gone. I really don't have a lot left on this flank. There are still a couple of units from David, and that's about it. So if they want to push on H, they can. Now the good news is, we have managed to reconquer a couple of the caps, so we're now to make a +6. With 1050 left, and some of the units over on my side already getting engaged again, we're not getting a whole lot of points. With the enemy definitely is. They're already at 26, what is that, 26, 28, 70? It's difficult to tell with the screen that I have. They're starting to make +3. If they clear out this flank, which they can, they're going to get a whole lot more. It's getting the Silent Hawks away. Little Bird with the STT. Get those guys deployed as quickly as possible and get some more intel and potentially a bit of anti-air capability. Didn't really need that, but I did feel like I wanted to have some AA at all, rather than not have it and just get rolled up by a couple of Hinds, for example. There's the TOW 2B team. I still have those airborne units on the flank. And there is also, I think, an Abrams from one of my allies. I think it's David again. But as I'm not really doing a whole lot of recon on the flank, he's not getting a whole lot of use out of that tank. It's just there as mostly a backstop. I suddenly remember I have weapon squads, which are able to engage vehicles quite nicely. So I should be using those. I don't know why it took me this long to remember that I have those in my deck. You know, like I said, it was one of those games where you just don't do as nearly as well as you wanted to. It's one of those days. Anyway, scores. The enemy is now to +6 from kills. We're at a +6 from caps. That is not good because we need at least 3 and ideally 6 points to win the game. With 3 points we're going to have a draw, and of course nobody likes to draw. And oh dear. There's an entire armored column coming in. I'm seeing 5 to 6 tanks, and I got nothing to stop that with. I got 2 units of airborne. We have, I think, another unit of airborne in the buildings at H, and that is about it. And I think they know. So what's going to happen is that I very quickly need to get my act together. I need to get the longbow over to that flank to start helping out as quickly as possible, because this thing carries 16 missiles. But I'm a little worried that I was going to miss the opportunity to kill things here before that whole column arrives with the anti-air. So I decided to keep the longbow there. Nighthawk comes in. Trying to get some damage in on the infantry there. Especially as there's a recon force in there. I want to get them out. But look at that train of units. Look at that train. And now look at my flank. That is a bit of a problem. 1 cruise missile, 2nd cruise missile out. Thunderbolt pulls out. AGS is pushing in. That was a close miss, I think, on the Sentinel. That was actually a kill on the Sentinel. I decided to call in 2 A-10s. Try and get some damage in with those missiles that they carry, the Mavericks. I thought, well, target-rich environment. Let's get the Mavericks into play. Yes, I know there's a bunch of anti-air into play as well. I don't really expect these birds to survive, but maybe I can get just enough points to make sure that they don't get H, and that they're going to be dissuaded from further attacks. The longbow over here is getting completely destroyed. Weapon squad pushing forward, there goes the longbow. Chancellor David also trying to help out with a couple of Abrams, but that many Abrams are not going to really hold the line that well. Yes, they are T-72s, but if they push close enough, they will kill you. There goes another M8 of mine. Thunderbolt comes in. Thunderbolt having some difficulty acquiring targets, because the enemy were popping in and out of view every time. Thunderbolt rushes in, gets a missile off, and everybody smokes up, leading to the complete loss of visibility. 1 Thunderbolt dies, the 2nd Thunderbolt is already trying to fall back as there is an enemy aircraft coming in. Raptor is now on station, or at least coming into station, but of course that Thunderbolt is already cooked by the time that it gets there. STT tries to shoot the jet, Thunderbolt dies. The enemy aircraft dies. There's a lot of aircraft being shot down, both mine and theirs. But aircraft tend to be expensive. And they're now at a +9. We're at a +3. And you can see that we have almost nothing left. I got those 2 weapon teams. But the weapon teams aren't exactly a great fit for this particular situation. The enemy can just push and push and push, and they can keep getting kills. They don't really have to, because they just need to get H. In which case they're mitigating our +3, or at least getting closer to it. 6 minutes left. What am I to do? Well, if you have any good ideas, let me know, because I was kind of out of ideas at this point. The only unit that I thought to get in was an additional Thunderbolt, sorry, additional Nighthawk. Try and get some additional, what do we call them, cruise missiles on targets. So, yeah, I just kept dumping cruise missiles. And that was about the extent of my plan. Just keep doing as much damage as possible. My infantry, with their low-end anti-tank, was never going to be able to hold the line. So that really forced me to start rethinking the deck as I have it. I need to get better units in. Comanche spots Derivatia, so immediately has to be pulled back. There's that helicopter that I was finally worried about, but this probably is the first helicopter that I've seen since the start of the game, at least on this flank. The STT do manage to take it out, and then I'm going to relocate these because they have no options if the enemy decides to push tanks into their position. Comanche's pushing forward again, looking for targets. They are stealthy birds, and look at that. I find some targets, and this is when the rocket pods come into play. They very quickly, especially with their guns and rockets, start eliminating things, throwing a rocket at, throwing a missile at a tank there, and try to pull back. Little dash forward, getting some damage in, pulling back. The other Comanche was still alive, at least not as badly damaged as the first one, so I tried to get another bit of damage out of it. Unfortunately, at this point, the infantry had smoked up, and I could not see them. So I was kind of putting that Comanche at risk for really no payoff. I thought maybe I can get another missile away, so let's do that. But of course, as I didn't know what the enemy anti-air was, that almost got shot down. F-22 over the front line manages to take a missile, and I have to pull back that one. With 4 minutes, not 4 missiles, with 4 minutes left, I probably won't be seeing it again, especially not after it got shot down just now. At this point, I'm not really sure where the enemy tank group has gone, so I decided to just push it, and I decided to try and get back into Hotel. Maybe I can get it back from them, maybe not, we'll see how it goes. The other Comanche, the one that was badly damaged, has been repaired. Might still be able to fling some missiles at targets and then pop back into cover. F-35A in to try and deal with all that anti-air. Unfortunately, not too much of its radar guided. Fortunately, however, on the other flank at H, I am getting some damage in. And there, once again, is a group of units, but I'm not sure if it's the same one. I'm not sure how much is left. Look at that. Again, seed missiles just getting deflected. I'm not sure how much of it's left. I'm not sure how much anti-air they got left, but that's a Derivatia, and it's very quickly shooting down both Comanches, and gone. Nice. So at this point, the enemy has about 6,000 points more than we do, and they're standing to make a +9 from that. We're standing to make a +6. Not good enough. 2 minutes 45 left. Not great. So let's start the post-mortem, if you will. What should I have done different? Well, for starters, I need units which are capable of doing damage to dealing damage to tank units, armored units. I need the capability of getting rid of tanks very quickly at short range. And not just tanks. I need the ability to very quickly get rid of units such as transports. BMP 1, 2, 3s, I don't care. They just need to get rid of. And I'm not getting it. Maybe with deployment of more weapons teams, I would have been able to get a slightly better firepower situation here. I just need a few better upgrades for my AT. So maybe I can get the Ranger, what is that? The Ranger Maws, I think? A Ranger with the Carl Gustaf M3 or M4. That might have had a bit more of effect. Because as it stands, I just don't have that capability. And that, I think, cost me a lot of units. Not being able to mitigate the pushing effect that those units had, that, I think, cost me a lot. And with that, it not only cost me a lot, it cost my team a lot. Look at that, we're behind by 7,000, actually 7,500 points. The enemy has won this fair and square with 90 seconds left to go. As for aircraft, I'm going to try not running the F-35. The F-35 and its seed missiles are just far too easily mitigated. And I can keep calling it in. I can get the missiles out and I can get back out. That's usually not the problem. It's just that the missiles don't actually do anything. And oh look, it's the tank column again. For the Comanches, I might switch out the Hellfires and potentially, or I might switch out the rocket pods and potentially the the Stingers as well in order to get more Hellfires. Because if I can get a stealthy helicopter, which can pretty quickly push, get some tank damage in, or at least get some damage on transports and then pull away again into stealth, that might be very valuable. Because again, that's anti-tank capability or anti-vehicle capability that I simply do not have. As for how I play the deck, I think if I have that better anti-tank capability on my infantry, I can do a bit more urban warfare, because I can actually get rid of vehicles. If everything that I'd use against a vehicle, as I'm doing right now, is something in the form of a tow missile, or at least a missile rather than a rocket, you need a bit of range, and sometimes you simply don't get that. If the enemy approaches from between buildings, you don't get that opportunity. 1 second left on the game, and no surprise how that ends. They get a plus 22 over 4, so it's a major defeat. I'm surprised it's not even a total victory for them. And you can see that I scored 5,645 kills versus 7.7k in losses. Well done, with a KD of 0.73. Arguably, there were people who had a lesser KD than that, but, well, I did as best as I could. At the time, with the units that I had. They definitely need to get changed, and I will do so when I get the opportunity to play the game again. For now, I hope you have enjoyed the video, even if it was a major defeat on my part. I hope that it can give you some insight into how not to play the Airborne Special Forces in this case, and to potentially show you what I could have done better. If you see anything else, let me know down below in the comments. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you soon for more.